All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. I am your host, Sean Redfern. Today, we're going to do Deep Dive Thursday on a Tuesday because we are flying on Thursday. This is show number 3 for the week. We'll get deep down into Michigan and Texas this weekend in Ann Arbor. Now that the season is in full swing, I would just like to remind you guys of what we do around here during the season. Monday is always initial reaction. Obviously, we did it early this week due to the short week, but it's Drunk Sean talking, folks. It is the guy that watched the game with his heart on his sleeve, pouring it all out for you guys on Monday. I've watched none of the replay. I've hardly probably looked at any stats. It is just my thoughts from during the game. Then we come back Tuesday for the after action review where we actually have rewatched the game at length. We've looked into the stats at length, and what we do on Tuesday is we try to decide how wrong Drunk Sean was, or maybe how right Drunk Sean was. A lot of times they marry up, sometimes they don't. If I'm wrong, I always come on the show and say I'm wrong. Thursday we always do a deep dive of the following opponent. And then Friday, we do Trace Otra games, which is 3 games that we picked to pick on that weekend. Always good games. Always, generally, always ranked games. If we can find 3 ranked games where both opponents are ranked, both teams are ranked, that's what we're going to go with 9 times out of 10. And then we do 4 keys and a prediction for our game that week. So you'll get to hear what I think the 4 keys to victory for Texas are for that weekend and a prediction on that game. Uh, So we'll do that every single week throughout football season. On today's show, not only are we going to preview Michigan a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about, we can't talk a lot about it, we're going to talk a little bit about how Florida State is just an absolute shambles right now as a program. Check us out on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, at Horn Takes. You can find us, if you don't like videos, you can find us just podcasting at Apple Podcast, iHeart Podcast, Spotify Podcast. We're on all of them. And if you don't like any of that stuff, which if you don't like any of that stuff, you probably ain't gonna like this one either. But you can find us at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. All the podcast episodes go up there. You can listen to them. If you guys drive around in the car all the time, maybe you're a delivery driver, maybe you're on planes a lot. I don't know. Travel a lot and you like to keep up with sports, especially Texas sports. Check us out in those places just to get the podcast. We'd appreciate the support. Texas and Michigan preview. A few years ago, when you look up and you see that Michigan is on the schedule, as a Texas fan, you're thinking, yes, sir, that's another big out of conference game. Uh, One thing that we have noticed out of Chris Del Conte is he is absolutely not afraid to schedule some big time out of conference matchups for the Texas football team. We've seen Alabama. We're fixing to get the front end of a Michigan home and home. We've got 2 against Ohio State the following 2 seasons, and then Michigan comes back to town. Obviously, not afraid to move into a conference that is the premier conference. So Texas, not afraid to play these early big time games because they're huge risk reward, right? And actually, in today's climate, the risk is almost all gone. I would love to see more teams start to play these types of matchups. Nobody wants to go see Ole Miss beat up on whoever the hell they just beat up on, Furman. I mean, what the hell is that crap? Nobody wants to see that shit. Schedule somebody good. If you lose that first game, you're not out of the playoff picture. If you win that first game, you've solidified yourself as a a team that's really a danger to make it into the playoff and maybe even make a run in the playoff. So I don't understand anymore. We're not in the BCS era anymore. I don't understand why we keep seeing these just awful out of con. I mean, the one thing I hate about the SEC is that they fall back on the we're in the SEC. The schedule is so tough in conference, so we have to play some weak ass teams out of conference. Man, no, that is some bullshit. And kudos to the ones that will go out and play some really good teams. Texas and Michigan preview. It's the first meeting since the Rose Bowl in 2005 when Texas kicked a game-winning field goal as time ran out to win that one 38-35. If you're old enough to remember, you saw Vince Young run wild in that game and just absolutely thrust Texas into the onto the stage as a program that was there and was ready to really compete at a national level. We had seen Texas be pretty good in the years prior to that, the few years prior to that. They just never quite get over the hump, never quite could get over the hump, and they absolutely did in that Rose Bowl. It's the only meeting in the series, so Texas wins this one, or Texas owns this series 1-0. I know Michigan would love to even it up this Saturday. The kick, 11 a.m. Central Time. That's 12 noon on Fox. Game day is going to be there. Big noon kickoff is going to be there. And I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, uh, but I think the last time that happened where both were at the same spot was back in 2022 when Alabama came into Austin to play Texas. A very, very good game in that one. Could be wrong on that. They might have both went to go see Colorado or something like that this last year. I can't, when the Colorado hype train was going, and they were they 4-0 or something like that, and then they lost every single game the rest of the season. Uh, but yeah, I don't know that's ever happened. It certainly hasn't happened at a Texas game since that 2022 game. The weather for this game, holy cow, is going to be absolutely perfect. If you are a college football fan, you've seen a lot of college movies. You watch Rudy. I love that movie, by the way, but you watch that movie and it just looks cold all the time in that movie. It looks either cool or cold. It never looks hot. And that's just, man, just that is what college football is to me. Like, I, I wouldn't say I'm like one of these fall people. Like, I don't eat pumpkin spice. I don't like put hay bales in front of my house. I never carve pumpkins. I like to go to a pumpkin patch. I like to go do that when it's nice and cool outside. College football, when it is cool outside, is the most perfect thing that God has ever created. And this one is going to be awesome, folks. Highs in the low to mid 60s. Lows overnight coming into this game are going to be in the high 40s. So we're going to be looking at 50-degree around, somewhere in the 50s at kickoff, and maybe it warms up into those 60s. It's going to be partly cloudy all day on Saturday. There is a slight chance of rain early Saturday morning, and on Friday there's a very big chance of rain in Ann Arbor. So I think the field will be wet, a little bit wet. I'm assuming that they have moved into the 21st century and have good drainage on that facility. I don't know that, so I don't know. I don't know that I'd look for the field to be super sloppy. The last time I saw a rain gauge estimate, it was like less than an inch. So I don't think it's enough rain to mess up the field, but it's definitely enough rain to bring in some really, really, really cool air. We are excited about that. Winds northwest at 10 to 20 miles an hour, so it's going to make that low 60 high, and it's going to make those 50s at kickoff feel a lot cooler. I feel. As Texans, I don't have a fucking clue what to wear. Me and my wife have been talking about this for weeks now. Like ever since I started looking at the extended forecast, um, and and I think we're just gonna bring a bunch of hoodies and some shirts and some jeans and maybe some shorts because I think on Thursday it's gonna be hot. And I'm gonna pack a Horn Takes podcast hockey jersey. I got a couple of hockey jerseys made, Texas hockey jerseys, and they are freaking sweet. So you might see me sporting one of those. You'll definitely see me sporting a hat like this, and I'll definitely have a Horn Takes podcast koozie in my hand with a cold beer in it. So if you see me, come say hi. We'd appreciate. I love to talk. I love talking to folks out at games. Always a good time. Yeah, come by and say hi. If I have a Ask for a koozie. If I got a koozie, I'll give you a koozie. I plan on bringing a few koozies just to kind of hand out to some Texas fans. So that'll be pretty fun trip. Come see me. We'll say hello. I might even I might even interview you. Put you on the show. How cool would that be? The line on this game has moved tremendously. Preseason, I think it was -3. It's all the way up to -7.5 in my book. So Vegas is not high on what Michigan did in that Fresno State game, and they seem to be high on what Texas did. Now I know that the line isn't set necessarily by who Vegas thinks is going to win and how much they're going to win by, and I know that when the line moves, it doesn't necessarily reflect the confidence Vegas has in that team. It's all about how much money's coming in, which side the money's coming in generally. Uh, but generally when you see the line move like this, uh, it moves like this for a reason. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think 7.5 is a lot. I thought 32.5 was a lot this past weekend against Colorado State, and they absolutely murdered that line. I mean, they hammered the shit out of it. So I don't know. But let's dig into this. Let's do a deep dive on this Michigan team. They have not lost a game in Ann Arbor in August and September since 2015. That's pretty good, right? And they haven't lost a home game since November 30th of 2019, so that's pretty good, right? So we're going into an environment here as Texas fans where Michigan expects to win. And I know they rolled the team over a lot, but those guys expect to win at home. So I mean, whether you think Texas is just that much more dominant than Michigan on paper, I don't think it matters. This team is not going to come in there, this Michigan team, and roll over. They expect to win at home. They are replacing 16 starters from the 2023 team that won the national championship, 15-0. Finally got it done for Michigan after being in the playoffs a couple times and not being able to get it done or not being able to get over that Ohio State hump. So it was kind of interesting to watch the growth of this Michigan program. They got a little better, but they couldn't beat Ohio State. Then they started beating Ohio State consistently, but they couldn't do anything in the playoffs. Then they go on, win a national championship last year. But they're replacing 10 guys on offense and 6 on defense. They do get back Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, those outstanding defensive tackles on the inside for Michigan, and they are good, folks. Really good. They remind me a lot of watching Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat just tear shit to pieces almost every snap last season. They remind me a lot of that. They got Will Johnson returning at cornerback, who outstanding All-American type cornerback, returned a interception for 86 yards and a touchdown against Fresno State to really lock that one in and seal the deal for Michigan on that one. On the offensive side, tight end Colston Loveland is their lone returning starter, and he is a big target. He's 6'5", 245 pounds. We'll talk a little bit more about him, but he's a pretty good weapon for that offense. The other thing, not just rolling over players, but they are rolling over coaches too. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh leaves because he's scared to get busted for all the cheating shit he did while he was there. He heads off to the NFL. Sharon Moore, who's the guy that filled in for him for a few games while Harbaugh was suspended for probably cheating. I don't know. He was the OC on that team. He's now the head coach, and they brought in 3 new coordinators. They got a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. I butchered that, and a new special teams coordinator. They're 1-0 this season, obviously, with a 30-10 win over Fresno State. But folks, Michigan really struggled offensively in that game. They completed less than 60% of their passes. They only threw for 121 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Davis Warren. So there's kind of a obviously you lose your quarterback to the NFL. There's not always a situation where Arch Manning is just sitting there waiting to come and be the quarterback going forward. So there's kind of I wouldn't say it's a quarterback controversy after watching this Fresno State game, but there was certainly a quarterback battle in fall camp. We saw both guys in this game against Fresno State. Davis Warren did most of the lifting, though, especially in the passing game. So I think he's their guy. I don't. Yeah, I think he's got to be your guy. I just don't think Orgy is definitely a weapon, and you'll see him bring him in and he'll run some. But he's just not as sharp throwing the ball down the field as Davis Warren. I mean, I think just the short, and it's only one game, but the game the Fresno State replay I watched, he looked pretty good when he had some time, and he can get the ball out there. So, excuse me. They did have 163 yards on the ground for 4.4 yards per carry. Khalil Mullings with 92 yards on 15 attempts, and I think he's not the guy you thought was going to be the guy. I think everybody thought Donovan Edwards was going to be the guy. Donovan Edwards had 11 carries for 30 yards. And then the aforementioned Orgy, and that's spelled G-I, not G, or excuse me, J-I, not G-Y. He had 5 attempts for 32 yards out of the quarterback position. The long rush for the day was 21 yards, so not super explosive. But Michigan, even when they've been really good, just not a huge explosive running team. They just could do it consistently over and over and over again. And by the end of the game, they were wearing your ass out. We talked about Colston Loveland. Uh, he had 8 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. Outside of that, 7 guys caught 8 passes for only 34 yards. So Colston Loveland, clearly the guy that Davis or Warren Davis is the most comfortable with, and I understand why. He's a big dude. He's really a versatile guy. Has nice hands, pretty decent speed. So I think Colston Loveland's going to be a name Texas fans should be paying attention to, and I'm certain that the defensive staff, is paying attention to him. The O line gave up 1 sack early in the game. They were just 4 of 11 on third down conversions. They were 2 for 2 in the red zone. So, not a great week offensively, but obviously not terrible. They scored 2 offensive touchdowns in the game. One really early and then one really late. Defensively, I thought there was some really good for them defensively, and then also some kind of, oh shit, uh, you know, they're susceptible to some things type of moments for them. But I thought overall they were good. Uh, you hold a team to 10 points. That's they're probably not happy with that because I think their defense last year was like a single digit type defense for the majority of the season. Uh, but it wasn't bad. Uh, they did give up 234 5 yards passing. Excuse me, 235 yards passing on 61% completions. They gave up a touchdown, but they did have 2 picks, and and actually in back-to-back plays in the fourth quarter, they had the opportunity to pick off and did pick off one for sure. It got reversed because of a penalty, but they just narrowly missed having 2 picks there in the fourth quarter. I guess it would have been 1 pick because if you'd have caught the one that hit the ground, you would have never had to play right after it. But point being, the secondary is all over that ball when it's up in the air. They look like they're kind of susceptible to me with some big plays in the passing game. Fresno State had 6 guys that had a long of double digit catch in this game. So uh, we'll talk a little bit more. I noticed some things when I was watching the game. I'm sorry, I said watching the film. I hate when people say I'm watching the film. None of you guys have the film. You're watching a replay of the game. It's not the same thing. The run defense for Michigan is impregnable as it was last season in this game. Fresno State got 9 yards on 22 attempts. They were sacked 3 times for 30 yards. You take that away, even with that, 19 rushing attempts, 39 yards for Fresno State. There was not a lot of room in the run game. We'll tell you why in a little bit. 6 tackles for loss for the defense. Edge Josiah Stewart leading the way with 3 of those. 2 of them were sacks. He's legit. In fact, I'll just say at least the starters on this Michigan defensive line. I don't know about the depth. I think depth is probably a concern for them, but the starters are freaking good on that defensive line. It's going to be interesting to watch that matchup. They had 2 picks. Obviously, the one returned 86 yards for a touchdown by Will Johnson. And they held Fresno State to 2 of 11 on third down. So really good on third downs. If Fresno State got the third down, they were not getting a first down. Is pretty much the story of that game. Uh, I didn't rewatch. I watched the game found a guy on YouTube that did sort of like a Nash Talks Texas every play. So it was really quick. Took me like 30 minutes to go through. Well, a little longer than 30 minutes because I would rewind it. But I think the video itself was 28 minutes, something like that. Just some takeaways, just some quick hitters from watching that. They scored on an offensive touchdown really early in the game on a turnover, one of their first interceptions, real short field. And then after that, they almost went to sleep offensively. They had 3 long field goals throughout the rest of the game. And then they had one good. I think they really only had one good offensive drive the entire game. It happened at the perfect time. Fresno had just cut the lead to 6 after scoring a touchdown. They got the ball back around the 10-minute mark to go in the fourth quarter. And they took about 5 minutes off the clock, went right down the field. They got some big gains out of the running game. Nice big pass play late to Loveland to score a touchdown to really essentially put that one out of reach. And so it was a big drive, and the offensive line actually looked pretty good in that drive. Whereas in some of the other drives throughout the game, they didn't look so good. We'll talk about that in a second too. They like to line this Loveland kid up all over the place. We said before he's versatile. He's a big target, 6'5", 245. He seems to me the most dangerous split out wide. I mean, he really attacks those zones very well. And if they can get the ball to him on time, he is big enough. And I mean, he's not a super speed blazer guy. I mean, he's not like Tavion Sanders or Amari Nyblack or one of these tight ends that just is not really a tight end. They're a wide receiver that's just too big. He's not one of those guys, but he can move pretty well. He's also not one of these big tight ends that's like an Iowa guy that once he catches the ball, he just falls down because he can't run past anybody. So I mean, I really like Loveland. I think he's dangerous. Uh, he's a huge safety blanket for Warren Davis. One thing I think Texas will try to do is try to take that away, because that's where he wants to go with the ball almost every time. It's almost like his first read every time. So they'll get him in all different places. He plays like the true tight end. He'll play like flexed off the line. He'll play wide. He'll play in the slot. They line him up literally everywhere. He's a really good blocker in the run game. At least he was in this game. So nice player in Loveland. I mean, I think if you got to have somebody coming back and you're replacing an entire offensive line, which they are, I think a tight end is like the best thing you could have. A really good tight end for your brand new quarterback, and he's going to go for him. He's going to go at him. Uh, Linebackers and defensive backs really, really active in the run game in this game. But I think that makes them susceptible to getting beat on play action. Those linebackers coming up too quickly, getting beat a little bit over the top right in behind them, and certainly in one-on-one coverage on the outside. If you bring defensive backs into the run game like the way Michigan likes to do, you're going to have one-on-one matchups on the outside. And Fresno State was able to take advantage of those a little bit. Probably not as good as they wanted to, but they were able to do it a few times and ultimately got in the end zone because of it. The DBs attack quick screens. So you've probably watched Texas play under Steve Sarkisian. A lot of this snap out to the outside and off to the races, they are going to attack that. And I think that sets up a pretty neat chess match between Steve Sarkisian and the Michigan defensive coordinator about how you want to continue to respond to those types of actions, because Texas is going to do that a lot. And you could see it. You could see it every time one of their wide receivers took a step back and turned to the quarterback. The cornerback over the top of him was firing. There wasn't a lot of hesitation. Maybe they just saw something with Fresno State on film where they thought that was the play. I don't really know. We'll see on Saturday how they choose to handle that. Their passing game offensively was primarily quick screens and underneath routes. They do not force the ball down the field very much. And if you watch this game against Fresno State, you know why. They're not really good at it. At least today. At least in that game, they were not very good at it. They did go deep one time. Man, I'm trying to think if they connected on it. It went deep a couple times, but I don't think they connected. I think they threw an interception on the first really good deep ball they threw. It got picked off. It looked a lot like sort of in the middle third, not the right third of the field like Jahdae Barron's, but similar type of deal. You had a trailing DB that kind of settled underneath and made a catch. So yeah, if I'm Texas, I'm not super worried about them getting behind. Now that's not to say that it can't happen, but I don't think they have a lot of weapons on the outside to get behind people. So they're going to try to dink it off and let those guys make plays and just keep moving chains. They they're not just I mean they're not a big play team. The offense seems to me like it's very predicated on just consistently executing and just taking it down the field and then taking what they give you at some point. And I think they will take some shots in this game because I think they're going to have to. I don't think that they're going to be able to go down the field consistently enough, just trying to dink and dunk and run the ball against Texas. Maybe I'm wrong, but the sense I get is they're going to have to take some chances on the outside. see if their guys can win some one-on-one matchups. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that all plays out as well. On defense, they blitz a lot and they bring it from defensive backs. They bring it from uh, linebackers. They're really exotic with some of the types of blitzes they do. They'll drop defensive linemen back and they go make plays. It's pretty awesome to watch. That defensive line, we said it at the top of the show, they're a handful. That is a very, very, very good defensive line. All four starters are good. The two middle guys just blowing shit up, like we said, Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. The edge rushers are really good off the corners. They're athletic out in space. Uh, they're good. So it's going to be a really big test for this Texas offensive line, who a lot of people think and consider one of the better offensive lines in the country. Mullings guy is tough, inside runner. I don't know how big he is. He looks like he's big. He definitely keeps those legs going. You can't really tackle him with your arm. To me, he seems like that prototypical, just thick, just stout running back from Michigan. He's probably not going to run away from nobody, but he's going to get you tough yards and do it pretty consistently, provided that offensive line can create some space. Onto the O line, I think they look like an O line that's having to replace a lot of people. They, there was not a lot of push early in this game in the run game for Michigan, and now they did start to get like they had that one drive sort of midway through the fourth quarter where they did start to lean on Fresno State, and they kind of made some hay in the running game. But prior to that, it wasn't much. A lot of the yards they got came from the running game by the QB Orji. So again, another interesting matchup. Can they figure out a way to make some space against that Texas front seven, where they don't have to take chances on the outside? It'll be interesting to see. I think their zone coverage is really, really leaky. At least it was against Fresno State. There was a lot of guys a lot wide open in the middle of that zone coverage, and so certainly if that's the case on Saturday, you would think that Quinn Ewers and that wide receiver core would be able to take advantage of that. We spoke about Orji; he's their run package guy. I would be shocked if Orji came in this game and threw a lot of passes. And I guess like injury notwithstanding, like if something were to happen to Warren Davis, Orji may have to come in and he may have to throw a lot of passes. But I don't think they're going to bring him into the game, and I don't think he's starting, by the way. But I don't think they bring him into the game and do much more than try to catch Texas slipping and get him. I mean, he's fast. He's an athletic runner, and that's a thing that's hurt Texas in the past. Is athletic quarterbacks. Not so much in the last couple of seasons, and certainly last season, but prior to that, uh, they gave up a ton of yards to athletic QBs. So something to watch for. Does Michigan think they may be able to bring the Orji package in and just continuously run the zone read against Texas and get that guy down the field? I don't know. Maybe so. I mean, I would hope that doesn't happen, but we'll have to see. Their place kicker, I believe they said he's a transfer from Arkansas State. That kid is money. He had a 45-yarder, a 53-yarder, and a 55-yarder, and none of them were close. Hell of a leg on this kid. Think their secondary, to me, is a perfect example. I talk a lot about, defensive lines having to help secondaries out. And our secondary last year is a perfect example to me of the opposite of what Michigan's is. Our secondary last year, now they weren't perfect. They got beat a lot and they were in the wrong spot a lot. But even when they were in coverage and they were doing what they needed to be doing, we just did not get enough pressure off the edge to keep quarterbacks in the pocket. And so they got picked apart a lot last year. Michigan, the exact opposite. They look really, really good, and they look really, really good because that defensive line is causing so many problems for opposing offensive lines. When Fresno State had time and their quarterback could sit back there, he found guys that were open. He delivered the ball to guys that were open, and they made plays after the catch. So critical for Texas to be able to protect Quinn Ewers in the pass game. And if they can do that and they can do it consistently, I think there's some opportunities to be had where they can take advantage of this Michigan secondary. This game was 6-point game with 10 minutes left, so very close game. Fresno State certainly in it. They kind of had that one drive late where they just could not stop Michigan from running the ball. And then they gave up the pick six after that, which really ultimately turned it into at least a more reasonable looking game from a score perspective. 23-10 does not look super impressive to anyone for Michigan against Fresno State. 30-10, a little bit more impressive. I like if I was to see that score, I would think that Michigan uh probably like ran 4 touchdowns. Like they ran the entire game. 4 of them were rushing touchdowns. They missed an extra point and kicked a field goal at some point, or maybe they even got a safety. That's what I would think, looking at a 30-10 score for Michigan. But that's not what happened at all in that game. It was a close game for the majority of the game, and really close, well into the fourth quarter. So I don't know if that means anything about Michigan's probability of winning this game necessarily. But if you're a Michigan fan, I think you're concerned a little bit by the way that game. You're certainly happy you got the win. You should always be happy you get the win. But I think there's a lot of things for Michigan fans to be concerned about. Matchups to watch in this game based off of just what I know, which isn't the whole story. But I think the two key matchups in this game to me are the Texas O line versus that Michigan D line, and then the Michigan O line versus that Texas D line. It's kind of a tale of two trench groups to me. You look at Texas, that offensive line considered one of the best in the country by a lot of people. There's a lot of guys on that offensive line that people think will play in the NFL. Uh, you got guys, you got guys that are first round type draft picks. You got guys that are just brand new to Williams at right tackle, Big Cam Williams. He was the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. Kelvin Banks is that guy that's been starting at left tackle since he was a freshman, and he's a certifiable first round draft pick. And then I think you got guys in the middle that are capable of playing in the NFL and have a ton of experience. So it'll be really interesting to see how they do against this outstanding Michigan defensive line. Almost every game is going to boil down to Texas, to the offensive line versus it's trench warfare. That's where you win games. That's where you win games in big time college football. And but I really think this one's interesting because you've got a good Texas offensive line versus a really good Michigan defensive line, and then you got a pretty new, maybe a little porous, definitely not gelled together Michigan offensive line against a Texas defensive line that on the interior is missing two huge pieces to the draft last season. They're having to figure out who can play there. It didn't look all that great in a lot of cases against Colorado State. So who improves the most out of that Michigan offensive line and that Texas defensive line group? Who improves the most between week 1 and week 2? I think that's going to be a big storyline in this game, and certainly whoever dominates the most in those two areas is going to win the damn game more than likely. I mean, that's just how college football is when you play these types of games. Um, I think another interesting matchup is Quinn Ewers and company versus this Michigan secondary. Some good players in that secondary. Will Johnson is an outstanding quarterback. A lot of people think Will Johnson is the best cornerback in college football right now. I don't know. Maybe he is. He's certainly one of the best. And if you're one of the best, you're damn good. So, but it'll be really interesting to see with all of these weapons offensively. I mean, we saw last weekend. We saw Matthew Golden have 2 touchdown receptions. We saw Isaiah Bond have a touchdown reception. We saw Silas Bolden have a touchdown reception. These are all 3 transfer guys that just got to Texas, and they had huge games in their first game. Then we saw freshman Ryan Wingo have a lot of yards, a lot of big plays in the air. We see guys like Jonte Cook. Texas has just a tremendous amount of weapons at the wide receiver positions to throw at that Michigan secondary. Of course, that's all predicated on them being able to protect Quinn Ewers. I think they'll do an okay job. I mean, I think Michigan's going to get theirs too. Like I said, those two trench battles are going to be really fun to watch for a big guy like myself that loves the big dudes. It's going to be fun. And then I think another matchup to watch is Colston Loveland versus that Texas back end, the big tight end from Michigan. He's a problem. And I think I've been a Texas fan for a long time, and I have seen some tight ends just give us fits. I don't remember his name. Big kid from Washington several years back in the Holiday Bowl just ate our lunch. He played in the NFL. I don't know why I can't remember his name. I'm old. That's why I can't. I can't even remember my name half the time. He wore our asses out. I remember Iowa State having a couple tight ends here recently that wore our asses out. There's just something about those big dudes. They're not overly fast. They're probably really athletic because they are so big, but they're just huge targets. As a quarterback, you almost just can't miss them. Maybe DJ Uiagalelei could miss him, and I know I fucked his name up. I've never been able to. I just call him DJU, so we'll just go with that. DJU, he could probably miss him. But most guys are going to find it really tough to miss those big guys like that. So there they are, man. Those are the matchups I'm interested in. We will come back tomorrow, Thursday, and hopefully, I'll tell you guys in a minute. Florida State, folks, what the hell is going on in Florida State? They are in, I mean, if I'm a Florida State fan right now, I am in absolute shambles. I probably am like deleting all of my freaking Twitter. I'm deleting all of my social media. I probably am not like I'll probably have the games on the rest of the year, but if my wife makes me go to some kid birthday party, I'll probably go to that just so I don't have to watch the game. When it gets out of hand, I won't watch till the end. I'll just go find something else to do. That's how I was with Texas football just a few years ago. I finally just got to the point where I was done. And I think if you're a Florida State fan, you are probably done right now with what's just, I mean, so you missed the playoffs last year. You have a great season, you have a perfect record. You missed the playoffs because I don't know, like half your team was hurt, and the everybody on the planet knew you couldn't score more than 10 points against anybody. So you missed the playoffs. There's a whole lot of backlash again. And by the way, I'm generally against a team with a perfect record from a major conference not making a playoff over teams that have lost games. I got to say, I'm generally against that. And I really was surprised that it actually happened. But again, they were so beat up. Everybody knew they didn't have a chance in any of those games. They couldn't compete with any of the four teams that were in the playoffs. Would have absolutely skull drug Florida State in a playoff game last year. And then Georgia just absolutely emasculates Florida State in a bowl game. What was it, 60-3, 66 to? I mean, it was a total just annihilation. And that game could have been so much worse. And everybody talks about Florida State not having all their guys. Georgia didn't have all their guys either. And they still ran right over the top of them. I mean, that is the worst. When I was in college, we played a team that it was their very first college football game. They didn't have a place to practice. They didn't have a place to get dressed. They didn't I think they were coached by students. Like it was bad. And this is Division III football in Texas. NCAA, son. Anyways, this team was so bad, and we beat them 55-0. And it felt like the worst ass kicking I had ever placed on anybody in my entire life. And that is not even close to what Georgia did to Florida State. So I mean, that's just some perspective for you. Uh Mike Norvell and FSU fans, they piss and moan all offseason about it. Danny Kanell, their minister of piss and moan all over Twitter, just won't shut up about all of this shit. They bring in a guy to be their starting QB that, I mean, in my opinion, has essentially been run off by two other coaches in DJU. I mean, at least one for sure. Dabo told him to go. There's no doubt in my mind. He was the starter. I mean, he was the de facto starter, and I don't think unless Dabo told him to leave, he was going to leave. But I think Dabo Swinney told him, "You're not going to start here next year, or at the very least, you're not doing enough for me to just hand you the starting role going into next season. You got to compete for this thing." And I don't think he liked that, so he moves on to Oregon State. He's there for a year, and then he leaves Oregon State. And honestly, I don't think Oregon State's sad to see him go. But for some reason, Mike Norvell says, "Yeah, come be the quarterback. You don't even have to compete." And I gotta think there's no way he's just going somewhere without being guaranteed he's the starter. Uh, I, he's already the starter at Oregon State. I don't think he's going somewhere else. big NIL deal as they gave him? I don't think so. So expectations for this 2024 season, through the freaking roof. They're a top 10 team ranked wise. Man, a chance to get the program back on track after a tough ass kicking in a bowl game and a really good season prior to that. So man, FSU fans on cloud nine, man. They think they got their guy. They got a quarterback that they think is good. They start the season off with 2 straight ACC losses to unranked teams. They were absolutely dominated in the trenches by both of these teams. Boston College and Georgia Tech dominated Florida State's defensive line. And by the way, people felt like, I don't know which game day guy it was or which analyst it was. This was supposed to be one of the better defensive lines in college football. And they have been pushed around like 6th graders at a high school football game in both games they've played. They have been outplayed at the most important position on the field in both of these games. DJU just looks absolutely horrible out there on the field. He missed a play. He missed a bunch of plays last night, but he threw a pass out of the back of the end zone to a guy that was wide open. And I sincerely believe this. 80% of the morons on Twitter that talk about football all the time probably could have made that pass. He wasn't under pressure. It was just a horrible throw. Then they inexplicably go for it on 4th down a little later, and he throws an interception to he throws it to absolutely nobody close that's wearing the same jersey he's wearing. Nowhere near one of them. He's just bad. And he may be a great kid, and he must be the best practicer that's ever been in college football, but he is not a game player. He is not a gamer. If you're Mike Norvell, Florida State invested a lot in that kid NIL-wise, and I get it. But he's clearly not the guy. Like, you got to cut your losses. Let somebody else play, or Florida State season is about to go down the shitter. I mean, if you said Florida State was going to be 0-2 with that schedule, people might have put you in an insane asylum. There's just no other way to put it. They suck. I don't feel bad for them because they're loud and they're stupid. But man, what a rough start for Mike Norvell and Florida State. Check us out Thursday from Ann Arbor, folks. We're gonna try to do a show with the big house in the background. So we'll probably head over to the campus after we arrive in Ann Arbor on Thursday. And check out and see what we can do, man. I really want to do that. I think that'd be awesome. We'll do our Trace Ultra game picks. We'll have our 4 keys and a prediction for this Texas at Michigan game. Find us on Twitter and TikTok at Horn Takes. You can also find us at YouTube at Horn Takes. Give us a subscribe. Give us a follow. It will not cost you guys nothing. And I would really appreciate the support. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. We're getting close, folks. We're getting close to this big time early season matchup. I'm excited to go to the big house. I cannot wait. You guys get hooked.